Hello everyone and welcome to the MedTech Summit Digital Week, brought to you by the producers of the face-to-face MedTech Summit events, which will be held in Dublin the 12th to 16th of October and in Philadelphia the first week of December. My name is Rebecca Brady and I'll be your host for today's session, unfolding the MDR through the lens of a remediation partner. First, I'll cover some quick housekeeping items. If you experience technical difficulties with audio or advancing slides, refresh your screen with F5. If you're experiencing other issues, hit the question mark button to receive assistance. At any time during the presentation, submit your questions into the Q&A window on the left-hand side of your screen. In 24 hours, you'll receive a link to watch the recording of the session. You can download a few featured white papers in the resource list box on the right-hand side of your screen. And let's begin by introducing our speakers from Tati Alexi. So first we have Vamsi Ravali, Regulatory Compliance Leader, Ajay Sinag, EU MDR Transition Leader, and Manali Bashani, PMS and SIR Leader. So thank you all for joining us today. I'll hand over to Sami now for you to begin your presentation.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Hello everyone, wish you a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. All of us have been dealing with this giant called EU MDR, and I'm sure everyone struggled in the beginning, came to terms with it sometime later, faced multiple challenges along the way, and have seen positive results of all the efforts to a certain extent. But to quote Robert Frost, the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. In the next 40 minutes, we will look at various challenges faced by manufacturers during the MDR transition, followed by solutions and best practices which will help the resolution of these challenges go smoother. We will also try to use some real-life scenarios and examples to explain the solutions and get an estimate of advantages they bring to the table. Now, let me begin by telling you about my personal entry point in this roller coaster journey. Me, my colleague Monali, and our core team, we started researching up on the EU MDR when its first draft was actually available. As part of the regulatory team, we were excited to understand and work on this, but for almost a year, none of our existing clients or any other customers, they showed much interest as they were sure this is not such a big deal. So we encountered phase 0, denial. Post a year, all of us, that is manufacturers, vendors, notified bodies, everyone seemed to realize that this is an iceberg with more and more hidden than what is actually visible. I clearly remember the initial strategy meetings with one of our customers. They had a huge product portfolio and we were to create the MDR strategy for all device classifications and detailed planning for the class 1 products. The first instinct I remember around the table was fear. But Tata Alexis team had a year-long preparation and it kept us a step ahead. We had worked out customizable estimation methodologies. We were equipped with MDD, MDR, gap assessment for technical files, and also all the QMS templates. So using these existing base elements, we started to group the products for maximum submission benefit using minimum tech files. We proceeded to plan the product rationalization and MDR implementation efforts for all the products. They were based on data points like certification expiry, sales numbers, product criticality, testing statuses, etc. So we had basically reached phase 2 and phase 3, embrace and analyze. Now, broken down into smaller units, the remediation and further planning did not sound so difficult. And finally, for class 1, I can proudly say that we have recently reached the phase 4, that is remediation. We successfully remediated more than 500 tech files altogether within the past 15 months to achieve the May 2020 submission deadline. Now, why am I telling you all this? Why am I telling you the story? Because I am sure this journey resonates with most of you, if not all, and therefore, as a part of this webinar, we decided to speak on various challenges we encountered in the EU MDR implementation. Our intention is not to address all possible challenges in the MDR domain, but it is definitely to address the ones that still persist. Now, to best utilize our time-restricted session, we have chosen certain unanticipated areas or challenges that have emerged as a byproduct of trying to remediate huge volumes of tech files within a finite duration. So we would cover areas such as project management, harmonization required in the remediation space, supplier coordination and follow-up, clinical evaluation and PMS expertise building, and last but not the least, the effect of EU MDR on non-European regulatory submissions. Moving on to our first challenge. Normally, while working on a new product development or design changes or any remediation activities, a small to medium-sized team with mixed skill set comes together and works on the product. Now, in these cases, the project management and product management, they go hand in hand, and we will find many experienced managers, leaders in the industry to handle these activities. On the other hand, MDR remediation requires that the entire organization to work in tandem. Now, projects of this magnitude, they don't happen in vacuum. They need to be integrated with business processes, systems, and organizations. The breadth and depth of project management required during this period is enormous. It brings in more complex requirements like planning, tracking multiple codependent activities which are worked upon by various cross-functional teams. Now, MDR is a time-bound activity, and working on compliance of the entire product range within this period requires a large influx of technical and regulatory resources. Estimating and fulfilling resource requirements without hampering the existing R&D, maintenance, and any other regular activities is definitely going to be a challenge. As an extension of finding, utilizing, and managing a large team, communication, collaboration, and dependencies need to be handled efficiently. When unexpected problems knock on the door, maybe it is time to look for some out-of-the-box solutions. To manage a large program deftly while being flexible enough to accommodate all kinds of twists in the tail, it requires discipline and at the same time an ability to retrospect and change every once in a while. So we decided to go the agile way. Adopting some of the agile practices, breaking down the large program into smaller workable units not only helps to manage them better, but also helps in estimating efforts and schedule. Stitching the individual statuses will enable us to forecast timelines and provide a visualization of accomplishments. Running sprints of work packages gives a chance for periodic retrospection and course correction. Collaboration amongst all stakeholders is a strong requirement for success of MDR program, and we should look at building platforms and processes for communication and collaboration with both internal and external stakeholders like the notified bodies. For example, taking a leaf out of the agile practices, having daily Scrum meetings have gone a long way in resolving dependencies smoothly in many of our projects. Many of our customers who have practiced this within their internal teams and with any vendors like us, they have reaped the benefits of having free-flowing periodic communication. Now, such periodic meetings with all the relevant stakeholders in one place gives everyone a chance to know where others stand. Also, dependencies involving multiple cross-functional teams get resolved quicker. In our journey as a remediation partner, we have been able to reap the benefits of a disciplined project management approach. A clearly mapped process flow for remediation was used in organizing the projects and controlling the chaos. Project schedules were drawn at granular level and tracked, enabling us to predict the schedules and maximize capacity utilization. All the integration points between various departments were identified and used for creating a consolidated dashboard. Now, this helped us to identify the bottlenecks in the early stages. As we progressed, we were able to bring in the lean aspects, which further improved our flow and helped reduce rework, wastage, and resultant impact on cost. In such a structured environment, we were able to accommodate changes and unknowns as they were unraveled on the way. We were able to limit the impact of any bad decisions we might have made in the journey and recover faster. We've spoken about MDR being a time-bound period activity and the requirement of a large skilled workforce to fulfill the remediation activities without hampering existing R&D and other regular activities. Now, this challenge, in addition to the program management, it acts as a strong motivator to look into collaboration with third-party service providers. Service providers bring in the ability to ramp up and ramp down skilled teams as and when required. Their forte is to bring cross-functional teams to the table and train them quickly to adapt to individual client requirements. This saves the manufacturer the need for onboarding a large number of people just for a couple of years to work on MDR compliance. It also provides them with the freedom to continue their existing R&D activities, thus maintaining their position in the market. Now, service providers, they come with an experience of handling large projects, as usually that is the nature of their job. Customers can then manage large programs by utilizing only a handful of their experienced leaders by utilizing such collaborations. Moving on to the next challenge. In an organization, multiple stakeholders and teams are involved in planning, creation, or remediation of product tech files. The complexity of maintaining harmonization amongst all these cross-functional teams is quite apparent. Now, to meet MDR deadlines, multiple teams, they work in parallel, and any communication gap between the respective stakeholders, it creates a lot of rework and significant delays. To give an example, if the CER team updates the product description and it does not inform other dependent document owners about the update, nor does it inform them about the modified content within the stipulated time, the organization will end up with an inconsistent documentation set, which will lead to significant rework and probably submission delays. Now, multiplying this scenario across all the products, we see that the small issue now turns into a huge problem. To summarize, I would say that lack of harmonization between cross-functional teams in an organization will definitely create challenges in product-specific content synchronization, which will eventually affect the consistency of the documentation, department-wise planning due to insufficient and delayed information flow, like maybe current status, notifications regarding changes, etc. And we can see that the significant impact on these issues can be observed when products are actually obsoleted due to issues like testing failures or supplier issues, after a good amount of effort is actually spent on remediating the entire technical file. Now, this challenge overlaps with the earlier discussed project management challenge, especially in the areas of communication and collaboration, and probably can be treated as a subset of the same. So all these interlinked pieces of the challenge, we can look at three options. First, transitioning from document management to content management. Second, project tracking tools for information flow and third, certain simple but effective best practices in gap assessment planning. As a medical device industry practice, document management should transition into content management. Content management involves splitting the documents into content units based on functional ownership and content reusability. Each content unit should be assigned to respective functional owner or department, which will act as source of truth for all the related documents. Now, documents can then be built by assembling the right content units. This method will reduce inconsistency among documents. It will definitely improve the document maintainability in the future. Review effort will be optimized and errors will reduce. Currently, in all our DHF remediation projects for various customers, we are managing content manually. That is why I established processes for information collection, review ownership, and interdepartment document modification notifications. Alternatively, this can be achieved by automating content management by using software tools. We had an opportunity to develop a similar tool, albeit not for the entire DHF, but for requirement documents, to integrate and harmonize requirement specification documents across different business units. We worked on creating a macro-based Excel tool for input data collection, where each data set was segregated and mapped to each relevant function. The requirement documents were auto-generated as per standard templates. And I must tell you that this tool was implemented across business units and it resulted in 25 to 30% reduction in efforts which were required for communication, efforts required for review, and finally effort required for approvals as well. Second piece of the puzzle, namely information management, can be achieved by organization-wide project tracking tool, where all the multi-departmental planning statuses can be integrated in one place. We are in the process of building such a tool for one of our customers to cater to their business need of being able to see the overall direction MDR activity is actually taking. Existing tools like Jira were found too bulky for this purpose, thereby necessitating development of new customized lightweight tool. Apart from the visualization of current status, these tools help the manufacturer to extrapolate timelines and identify possible delays in submission. Overall, such a tool will help to make quicker decisions, identify bottlenecks, and prioritize actions. Apart from content management and information and status management, adding some planning best practices will probably cover the major challenges in the MDR DHF remediation. While working with multiple customers in almost all major cross-functional areas, we have realized a two-step, simple but effective strategy for planning gap assessment and implementation. Step 1. Always assess gaps across all the cross-functional areas together to be able to see the bigger picture. For example, try to assess gaps in clinical safety, packaging, manufacturing, supply chain, etc. together, apart from the common practice, which is gap assessment in R&D and testing. Step number 2. Perform the product portfolio rationalization and prioritization based on probability of resolution of the gaps and corresponding efforts required for compliance. Again, to give an example, if the MDR compliance efforts are much greater than the predicted sales, it is probably a good idea to obsolete the product. Use the gap assessment to foresee the possible delays and plan to mitigate them in advance. Example, if testing effort or supplier collaboration and follow-up effort is high for a high priority product, advance these activities to gain enough time for compliance. Overall, I would say investing some time and effort in doing a holistic gap assessment will lead to better planning and eventual cost saving. To summarize this challenge, I would quote John Armstrong. You don't ask a juggler which ball is highest in priority. Success is to do it all. One of the surprising challenges which we encountered for almost all our clients was supplier coordination follow-up. Now, I'm calling it a surprising challenge because even though we knew it was an issue, we never imagined the scale of trouble it is going to cause in the beginning. The responses from the suppliers were much slower than expected, and most of the times data was just not available even after a long wait. History of contracts, previous communications, they haunted the outcomes. Suppliers who are competitors of the OEM or suppliers with confidential technical information, they simply refuse to share the documents. The big question became, when do you stop requesting for data or documents and start taking your own actions? For customers who source most of the products, it became a question of survival of the corresponding business units. I would say that this problem is a peculiar combination of technical knowledge and people coordination. The first step we worked on while trying to resolve it was to create a supplier coordination and follow-up process, where a dedicated team worked towards periodic follow-up timetable. It involved different forms of verbal and written communication on a periodic basis. The communication protocols were carefully designed to be person-oriented so as to not irritate the other party. And to support the coordination process flow, we defined the minimum artifact set for making the supplier request and worked on a plan to manage the rest using rationales and existing evidences. The success of this solution was observed when, for a particular client, we were able to recover 70 to 80% of the documentation in 2.5 months for more than 400 products. It was all done by a 2-person team coordinating with more than 70 suppliers. Apart from such kind of communication protocols, follow-up protocols, we have other possibilities, other options. Like OEMs can run a separate project with the suppliers for creation of critical documents, or for confidential documents, they can use supplier audits to prove evidences. So in these cases, observations or NCs from notified body audit, they will ensure that the supplier creates the documents while maintaining confidentiality in the process. To conclude, early supplier follow-up planning, well-defined communication protocols and a dedicated team for supplier coordination will be of great help for document and data recovery.
So this was all about DHF remediation, supplier follow-up. We enter the CER and PMS space. And for this, I would like to invite my colleague Monali, who's here, who's our CER expert, to speak on this challenge and provide you with some options. Monali, over to you.
Thank you, Vamsi. Hello, everyone. Monali here. Coming to clinical evaluations and post-market surveillance, I would like to discuss two key challenges today. Number one, the need for an MDR-oriented setup and expertise. And number two, the need for critical analysis in a clinical evaluation. To start with number one, the main challenge that we observe across OEMs is the lack of an adequate setup and expertise for clinical evaluation. And this is also true for post-market surveillance processes. Too often, the clinical evaluation processes follow the MDD, and they are not updated to align with MDR. If I have to quote one of the examples from my experience, it would be, certainly the equivalence. The best practices for equivalence do not take into account the additional constraints set by the MDR. And that is similar to PMS processes too, that there is an increased emphasis on proactive data collection rather than depending only on reactive data analysis. But the processes for doing so is still in progress or not totally matured. For this reason, it is important to perform the gap assessment with existing processes and templates to ensure alignment with the MDR. In addition to what I mentioned, the CER and PMS documents need to be aligned with the rest of the MDR documentation so as to ensure consistency and probably to avoid non-conformities being raised by the notified bodies. Hence, there is a need to monitor and track the open items that are part of the CER and MDR update. So when I say open items, it could be something like ongoing bench testing, it could be something like PMCF studies, instructions for use, or risk analysis updates. Another example would be when we retrieve the data from the vigilance systems. So here too, there is a need that this data across all the documents such as clinical evaluation report, post-market surveillance report, or PSUR, and summary of safety and clinical performance is updated. Now, this is only possible with the coordination between the teams developing the MDR documentation and the team performing the clinical evaluations. Another thing that is extremely important is to develop the pathways and work instructions. Why? It's because this actually stimulates the coordination and crosstalk to have consistency across all documentation in a medical device technical file. See, not just the setup, but having the right expertise is also equally important in ensuring an MDR compliant clinical evaluation. It is obvious from the discussion so far that developing a clinical evaluation is not a solitary task, but the coordination with other teams is also extremely essential. But then let us think, what are the inherent requirements of such clinical evaluation team? Do we only need one basic skill set of medical writing? Let's think over this. The first thing we need while creating a clinical evaluation plan or a report is to understand the subject device thoroughly. So we need a technical expert. Now this technical expert, especially for complex medical devices, understands and explains the technical nuances of the device design, which may potentially affect the device safety and performance. Next, a scientific writer who is required to perform comprehensive literature searches, appraise the literature, and analyze the clinical data. Now, it is vital that this data collected by a scientific writer needs to be critically analyzed to assess its clinical relevance. Hence, a need of clinician arises. Finally, a regulatory expert who is extremely essential to correctly interpret the various guidelines and regulations. And not only that, but to also delineate a course of action based on the data available for medical device under consideration. Let us use an example to illustrate the role of each expert. Let us consider a guide wire as a subject device. While creating a CER, a scientific writer performing a systematic literature review identifies several reports of kinking and unraveling. Now, in order to explain this occurrence of kinking and unraveling, a clinician's support is required to analyze the data in depth. He may come up with a feedback that kinking can be a result of the device itself and maybe not due to other procedural reasons, such as tissue dilator being pushed over the guide wire. With clinicians' feedback in mind, a technical expert can be approached. Why? To gain more understanding on the mechanics of the device causing kinking. A technical expert then may further determine that there was a recent design change in the guide wire material that allowed it to be more flexible so as to navigate tortuous anatomy. But this aspect also resulted in potential safety issues. And finally, a regulatory expert have to take all these data into consideration. There may be a need for her to verify whether these risks were adequately addressed in the device risk documentation or not. She mutually discusses this with a scientific writer. Is there a need to have additional clinical data for compliance? Otherwise, is the current data sufficient? The regulatory expert then determines whether or not a PMCF study is necessary. Of course, this discussion needs to be done in collaboration with the OEM, who is more closer to the product and its history. So you see, these collaborative efforts are required to be able to foresee the expectations of the notified bodies, to critically analyze the available data to determine sufficiency, to update the product documentation, and accordingly plot the next steps for a PMCF study if necessary. Now, coming on to the next challenge. With the introduction of MedDev 2.7.1 revision 4 and later MDR, what we observe is increasing emphasis being given on critical analysis of the evidence presented in a CER. The proportion of boilerplate language in a CER has drastically reduced. The notified bodies are scrutinizing the content to determine how the OEM has discussed the overall relevance and significance of the data in a CER. So let us see what are the core aspects of a CER when the critical analysis is of utmost importance. First, the clinical evaluation plan needs to identify specific and measurable safety and performance indicators for the subject device. Now, these are based on the indication, the intended use, claims, and hazard analysis of the device. Next, the acceptability criteria for these indicators need to be determined based on the state of the art, using the guidelines and clinical data on the same. And in the third step, every piece of clinical and non-clinical evidence, including testing, clinical investigations, clinical literature, and post-market surveillance data, is appraised and segregated into pivotal versus supporting data, of course, based on its relevance to the subject device. Now, this step is particularly difficult, but also extremely important, especially for ancillary devices. For instance, if the subject device is a surgical suture, it will be utilized in several different surgeries, and the studies citing the subject device would not necessarily provide outcomes on the safety and performance of the suture itself. At such times, it is essential for the clinical evaluations team to isolate the outcomes related to the suture rather than those related to other devices or to the surgical procedure. After this step is done, relevant data on the subject device are analyzed with respect to the risk documentation. This data then is compared with the acceptability criteria obtained from the state of the art. Most of the time, this analysis may reveal gaps such as insufficient clinical data to support the device safety and performance, or maybe new risk or risk with increased frequency. That's why one of the significant gaps that needs to be explained is the subject device safety and performance outcomes being out of range of the acceptability criteria. Finally, these gaps need to be clearly identified in the CER and discussed. If these gaps cannot be rationalized, a suitable PMCF pathway must be selected based on the gaps identified and the device classification. Thus, I would like to conclude on a note that these steps are essential stepping stones to developing a comprehensive clinical evaluation that adheres to the current guidelines and current regulations. And overcoming these challenges would help the OEMs or the remediation partners in successful as well as smooth execution of clinical evaluation. Thank you. Over to you, Vamsi.
Thank you so much, Monali. That was a lot of heavy stuff. So moving on to the next challenge. So far, we have seen all MDR related challenges, especially for the European market. Let's extend the scenario to non-European markets, which rely on CE compliance. That is, let's look at the impact of EU MDR changes on global regulatory product submissions in geographies like Brazil, Mexico, Cuba, Russia, Australia, etc. Local regulatory submissions may or may not differ from the central documentation technical file. A change in the central documentation, that is any technical documents like risk management file, CERs, labels, IFUs, etc., they will cause a mismatch between the global and local submission repositories. Now, direct effects of such a mismatch can be seen in practical situations where, let's suppose, local authorities like, say, excise departments, they reject products during the import and export process because the labels in their system, the local system, they do not match with the newly updated global labels. Some of the manufacturers who market in multiple countries, they will have a decent sized problem on their hands. The challenge lies in assessing the impact and addressing it for all dependent geographies. We are currently involved in developing a workflow to resolve this kind of problem for one of our customers. And to provide you with a little context of the final goal, let's say the customer has a market reach around more than 70 countries, and they need to analyze and remediate in the most optimum fashion all the corresponding local documentation to synchronize all their MDR related tech files to the local regulatory tech files. The first logical step to assess the regulatory impact in collaboration with all the regional country-specific RA points of contact, it is an assessment of how the MDR changes impact local regulatory submissions. Now, as per the project goal, we are in the process of searching, analyzing, and comparing the regulatory requirements for all 70 countries. Now, post the regulatory assessment, the next logical step would be to create a regulatory strategy and action plan. Now, this would include prioritizing the products and countries as per business needs, business strategy, forecasts, and selection of the right submission pathways like change submissions, notifications, no action required, or re-registrations, etc. Based on the devised strategy, one needs to compare the MDR documentation and regionally submitted documentation and work towards making the updates accordingly, and finally perform the final submissions. Once, let's say, all the approvals are in place, internal changes like inventory updates, etc., they need to take place, and finally to allow for the launch of the product. As a part of best practices, global regulatory submission archives with details like registration, change submissions, renewals, notifications, etc., it should be created and systematically maintained. Now, realizing this kind of assessment, the regulatory assessment, to be a global need, we are developing a software platform called iReg for continuous monitoring of local, regional, global regulatory information. And we are working towards launching this tool for both pharma and medical device domains. This kind of tool would include features like comparison of PMS reporting and submission requirements for multiple countries, tracking adverse event reporting, tracking competitor products, literature searches, amongst, say, many other features. Lastly, it will also have a back-end analysis support team, thereby equipping the technology with human intelligence. Post all these challenges, to conclude, everything that you have heard, we have discussed in the past 30-40 minutes, it points to the fact that we still keep unearthing challenges throughout our MDR journey. Some of them were anticipated, some of them were surprising, we were all in a limbo. We were struggling to maintain a balance between what we usually do and what we are supposed to do, what we should do. We have seen the need for extremely strong and robust project management, people management in all these areas we discussed. And the extent and magnitude of management requires strong collaboration between everyone working on this program. Challenges like interdepartment harmonization, supplier coordination, global regulatory compliance, they show that we should move ahead as a group and not just as an individual technical or business team. And despite the competition, we should avoid working in silos, but join forces together to achieve regulatory compliance. Now, challenges in the DHF remediation, say CER, PMS space, they show that we still need to keep working on our infrastructure, technical expertise, process improvements, and any technology support systems. Finally, to handle the massive amounts of work, we need to invest time and effort on analysis and planning before jumping into implementation. All of us are halfway through our running track with class 1 deadlines. This is a good time to pause, to learn it and run again. When the class 2 submissions to the notified bodies will start, we will have lesser room for errors and would also have to handle the time-bound feedback and closure of queries that come from notified bodies. Now, this would involve strong collaboration and commitment from all the departments, needing extension of the stronger project management practices for closure. MDR is for Europe, but similar changes will soon be seen in many other medical device markets like Japan, China, Canada, etc. Therefore, we should view MDR as an opportunity instead of a challenge. Instead of just doing it, we do it right to reap long-term benefits. We work towards success, namely, what's success for us? Good quality products, contented authorities, satisfied customers, and all that eventually leading to improved human life. Last but not the least, the scale of all these changes is daunting. Whether organizations are transitioning from MDD to MDR or they are starting fresh on the EU MDR roadmap, it may be useful and probably even necessary to enlist the help of consultants and service providers. They're capable of lending an informed perspective by prior experiences and a thorough understanding of MDR. This partnership would help to create your transition plan and focus on retaining and furthering the market presence. That's all from us. Thank you very much for listening to us for all this while. And we should probably open the floor for questions.
Thank you both for an excellent presentation. We've received a few questions already, but we will give everyone else a few moments to answer some questions in the Q&A box, and that's on the left hand of the slides. Before we get into the questions, I'm just going to run through some brief announcements. So firstly, thank you very much to Tata Elxsi for sponsoring this digital week. And also I want to draw your attention to our face-to-face Fentech events, which will be taking place in Dublin for our European event on the 12th to 16th of October, and in Philadelphia for our US events. Also, make sure to check out the resource list to the right of your screen, where you can download some featured white papers. But now if we get on to the questions. So the first question is, the MDR requirements are distributed and owned by different functions. How do you ensure the entire MDR compliance while working for your clients?
Okay, I think I'll take this one. If I have understood the question correctly, you were asking that all the MDR requirements are so distributed, so how do we maintain compliance? How do we work with everyone together? So maybe the answer to this question lies in all the bits and pieces we discussed during our first two challenges, but to gather my thoughts all together. From project to project, as service providers, our scope has been different, but we have created a robust process which will help us to communicate and collaborate with all the teams. So maybe I can go through the process step by step. It's not necessarily a service provider process, it can be used by anyone. Usually we start out with, especially for MDR, that is, we start out by mapping all the documents and their interdependencies. I'm talking about the DHF remediation kind of projects we have worked on. So in many places, client to client, the documents are different. They have different rules. They have different templates. So the first step would be to map out all the documents and all the interdependencies. By interdependencies, I mean that if I have to give an example, you have IFU, you have a product description, you have the risk analysis, you have the CERs. They all work hand in hand. The same information without, if the IFU is not completed, all the warnings and which actually result from the risk analysis should be present in the IFUs. If the risk analysis talks about residual risks, then the CER should address all the residual risks. Similarly, if you have validations from manufacturing, if you have validations, packaging related tests and validations, they all appear in the product risk analysis, etc. So you have all these interdependencies. So you look at all the documents, map all the interdependencies to begin with. Second, probably we do a high level gap assessment. So you look at MDR Annex 1, you see Annex 1, Annex 2, what are the kind of documents which are mandatory, then you look at what documents are available, and then you map out what is missing. This usually we do it with all cross-functional teams. It helps because once you know the availability of your documentation, you know how much effort it will take to create the rest. So each department can then disperse and get going with their own stuff to do. After this, we do a high-level planning with priority and dates. Like for example, if my team is working only on writing a CER, then I would request the other teams who are working on the risk management or who are working on the clinical data and all to tell me when they plan to finish their job so that I have all the priorities and dates. And then you get to plan the phases of the project. The first one would be to do a detailed gap assessment, especially maybe based on the GSPR, the safety and performance requirements given in MDR. You find all the missing elements. You see whether the documents are complete or not. You check for missing data. That is, do you have all the drawings from suppliers? Do you have all the material information, etc.? Then the next step is to create all the drafts. And then once your drafts are ready, you try to resolve all the interdependencies. So it's like each team is working on their own job and then they come together once in a week, they collaborate, they see where each of them stands, and then you plan out the end dates with all the interdependencies in place. One good practice which has helped us is to get the documents reviewed by the right stakeholders. That is, usually if you are doing a product description or something like that, you better get it reviewed by the marketing team, you better get it reviewed by the CR team as well. If you find the right reviewers and find enough bandwidth, then it will help a lot because then inconsistency just gets reduced by the human collaboration. And finally, once you have all the pieces of the puzzle, you assemble the whole package, of course, and you send it for submissions. Like I said before, strong communication channels is the key. We have worked on weekly meetings with all cross-functional teams. We have daily sync-ups with some of the teams. You just need to have the right communication protocols. You need collaboration from everyone. You spend time in planning, which will definitely help you make the deadlines without having much delays. So I would say that this kind of process, which is more or less similar in all our projects, this has helped even though the MDR requirements are distributed amongst many functions. I hope I have answered your question. Thank you. Can we move on to the next question?
Of course. The next question was, all the talent, you spoke about lots of different challenges during your presentation. Is this an exhaustive list of the MDR challenges for manufacturers, or are you aware of other challenges that manufacturers are facing and have you worked on them?
So I will take this one.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ajay.
Yeah. So
go ahead, Ajay.
It is not an exhaustive list of MDR challenges for manufacturers, The challenges presented here were covering only remediation aspect of EU MDR compliance. So manufacturers do have other challenges like UDAMED and UDI implementation, reclassification of devices, supply chain, and with regard to economic operators. Also, most of OEMs anticipated the manufacturing and implementation challenges, but the depth of those challenges is never identified in initial planning, which is now getting discovered. And few of the products are getting through EU MDR compliance assessment cycle. I mean, they are able to get this depth, and interestingly, the timeline for the submissions are getting delayed. But if you see, EU MDR project plans are now running into FY25 for many of the OEMs. Considering we remember when we originally planned, a few of these were getting over by around FY23 or early FY24. So yes, we have come across many such other challenges, but as part of this webinar, we are covering topics which are most common and relevant amongst all. Also, I would like to mention that the challenges vary between organization to organization and even within one organization, groups to groups. So based on what history organization had and how it has grown, like in-house development or acquisitions, contract manufacturing, or is it OEM, and also on what portfolio they have and the variety of the portfolio itself. So there are a couple of other factors like quality process preparedness, especially for legacy products, and any restructuring efforts taken in between, or availability of the documents for remediation, whether they have digital documentation or physical hard copies of tech files. So few older legacy files have data which not even yet digitized. So there are different set of challenges for each medical device company with respect to EU MDR, and each of these challenges require a customized solution. And we have been constantly unearthing and discovering these challenges and have been successfully finding and implementing permanent solutions for our customers now.
And then we have a question here about notified bodies. You mentioned during the presentation early involvement in notified body. Can you expand on that? And have you received notified body feedback for any work you've done so far?
I'll take this one. So yes, as notified bodies are also facing tremendous pressure of stringent reviews and audits for multiple submissions, and getting a quick detailed review response from them will not be an easy task as such. So hence, what we are recommending is OEMs to consider creating a summary of entire technical files, maybe covering evidences and conclusions, which will help notified bodies to perform faster and effective reviews, and also provide timely and early feedback in that matter. And answer to the second part of your question would be, currently very few of our clients have started receiving response from notified bodies for files which they have submitted almost a year earlier.
Okay. And how do you determine sufficiency of clinical data during the development of CERs?
Yeah, I'll take that question. We have been battling this question of sufficient clinical data for a long time now, so which has only got intensified under MDR. Now, every device comes with a unique complexity and history. So some of them are legacy devices and some would be recent launches. So legacy devices may not have systematic clinical investigations, and every OEM would want to justify the safety using the PMS data, more like the complaints data. So I would say that these needs to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis to check whether the data on the subject device is sufficient or not. The step of doing critical analysis is important, which I had discussed in the webinar. Now, this will help identify the basic safety and performance measures relevant to the subject device. These indicators are most probably identified, and data against these indicators is evaluated with an effort to set an criteria called the acceptability criteria. So if a subject device is able to fall under the acceptability criteria, an informed decision is taken about the sufficiency of the clinical data. Thank you.
We have another question about clinical data here. So in the current pandemic situation, when conducting clinical follow-ups are practically challenging, how do you address the gap of inadequate clinical data on the subject device?
Okay. This is a global challenge and a very good question, I must say. The need for PMCF mostly arises when there is a gap in the existing clinical data. Now, this is identified while creating a CER. Now, there are various methods of conducting clinical follow-ups. Some are generic, wherein we can conduct the literature reviews, database reviews, or complaints analysis. But these would have been already checked upon during CER creation. Then comes the specific methods like retrospective data collection or extended follow-ups or the actual clinical follow-ups or a user feedback survey. Now, the specific ones are more applicable for complex devices or devices with high risk classification, where a rationale or justification may not be sufficient. So the need for PMCF depends on what endpoints you want to evaluate for safety or performance. If endpoints are such that can be very well addressed by seeking a feedback from a physician or surgeon using the subject device, it is quite favorable in this COVID situation to conduct a user feedback survey because this can be completely done remotely. And there is no formal guidance on which method to be adopted for PMCF during COVID situation. However, there is a mention of user feedback surveys as one of the specific PMCF studies. So many OEMs are seeking an advice from their respective notified bodies for this approach and are receiving positive response from them. However, this method should not be considered as a generalized approach for all the type of devices in question and should be tackled on case-to-case basis. Thank you.
We're coming to the top of the hour, so I'll ask just one more question, and that is, how is the flow or solution you discussed for global regulatory submissions different from a traditional method? Can you explain the pros and cons?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So typically, core regulatory teams work on major country submissions, and regional regulatory teams work on the rest of the markets, like USA, Europe, Canada, and a few major key markets versus rest of the world markets. So as most of the key technical documents like risk management, usability, clinical evaluation reports, PMS, IFUs, labels, these all documents are getting updated to have EU MDR compliance. If OEM has some same products marketed in other countries with CE mark, then this shall require an regulatory action for these rest of the countries. So either change submission or notification, or there might be no action required based on which document is getting updated for that particular product, or what content updated in that document itself. So we take traditional method, then OEMs may require significantly increased manpower at both ends for core regulatory team as well as regional regulatory team to cater to this need. And as each of the product from OEMs portfolio is submitted to EU MDR and now needs to be analyzed for its impact on rest of the world countries where it is marketed. But at the same time, all this portfolio is going through resubmission of EU MDR in next 3 years itself. So there are few main tasks here, like assessing each country regulation for subject product, defining required regulatory approach for the product, that is change submission, notification, no action, and then creating the necessary set of documents for support for regional regulatory team based on new EU MDR tech file documentation, which is submitted to notified bodies. So hence, what we are suggesting as a solution for this is, as a third party, we can work on finding the optimum way to create a country-specific template, so which can be used centrally. And each of the countries where OEMs have their products marketed with CE mark, and providing the support to existing regional teams to draft the change submission and notification templates. So this way, the optimum efforts are utilized while maintaining the same number of people for core and regional teams. And these teams would be required to work on actual EU MDR work, which is currently going on. So this will have significant cost saving if you consider hiring at different locations for these niche skills, availability of resources, even the ramp up time, knowledge of these products, reusability of similar content. Like if you have prepared these templates for specific countries where OEMs have their products, these can be used later on as well during the sustenance as such after EU MDR. So this is what I would say pros of this method.
Excellent. Well, that's all the time we have for questions today. So thank you all for a great session. If you submitted a question that wasn't addressed, keep in mind that the speaker will reach out to you directly. This session was recorded and you'll receive a notification in 24 hours when the on-demand session is available for viewing. Before you log off, please take a moment to complete the feedback form so we can continue to improve your Digital Week experience. On behalf of Informa Connect Life Sciences, have a great day.